Okay, good morning, everybody, once again. Can you hear me this time? Yesterday, they said I wasn't close enough to the mic. Is that better? Yes. Okay, but I speak big. Okay. Try that once more. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you, Ashok. That's it. Okay, I'm not sure what time it is or what time I'm supposed to finish because everything is very fluid. And that's what I love about being with Nepali-speaking people. You know, we just jump in the river and we go. Okay. You know, yesterday I mentioned to you that God did something in my heart when I first went to Nepal those first few years. He put just did something in my heart that I love Nepalis. And then I'm here and I still do. Isn't that wonderful? You know? And that expanded then to Nepali-speaking people, not just Nepalis nationally, but as I had opportunity to do a lot of the research and the study and go different places, you know, and then God just kept expanding that. It was even in Darjeeling. I mean, in Nepal, I used to hear about those Darjeeling Nepalis, you know, and all of the conflict, well, not conflict, of course, a little bit of difference in, you know, we're the real Nepalis, or we speak the true, you know, Darjeeling Nepali is the really good Nepali language. Nepalko Nepali you know, so we have this competition going on, and other kinds of competition, and slowly learning to get to know more Himalayan peoples, the Sikkimese and the Bhutanese and the Bhutias and the Adivasis, etc. And you know, and I found myself here and there almost absorbing each other's bit of difference, or almost sense of they're different than us. When I first was in India, I didn't want to go to India. Okay, just being honest here. Kinola, because I had heard so much about those Indians from my Nepali friends in Nepal. And so, and I began to experience some of what they had experienced also. I would ride on the train, you know, and there was this really good-looking, well-dressed Indian gentleman there, and we're talking about what he does and what I do, etc. And then, you know, and then I work amongst Nepalis, and he's, oh yeah, they are really good workers, you know. They make great mollies. They make, you know, they're really good housemates. They're so loyal and trustworthy. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, you know, and I know Nepalis that are lawyers and engineers and doctors, and not only in Nepal, but in India. And he was, really? And, you know, and I was just like, ooh, it just didn't feel good. And I really had to repent of my attitude and ask Lord, give me a love. Help me to see other people as you see them through your eyes. You know, to see the beggars through your eyes. Because I was told by friends, and originally when I was in Nepal and in India, just kind of go with blinkers on, you know. Don't look, don't engage, or you're likely to really be hassled. And it's true, you do get hassled sometimes. But the Lord began to take me back to Genesis. Every one He has created in His own image. Each one His thumbprint is upon. Each one is a part of His family because He created them. That means they're my family. How should we treat our family? And it became the same thing as I began to look at different peoples and just say, Lord, you have to give me your love for all peoples. You have to give me your eyes to see others as you see them. And that's been a journey for me. I think some of you, in fact, it came out yesterday a little bit. Some of you have experienced where people are watching you when you go to the grocery store. You look a little different, maybe. You know, and when I was first back a few years ago, I was out with some elderly friends that have been good prayer supporters, etc. We sat down in a cafeteria, and they were treating me to lunch, and we were having a lovely time of fellowship. Lovely Christian people. And the door opened at the front, and suddenly I saw the ladies' faces going, oh, look who came in the door. And it was a Muslim family, and one of the ladies was dressed in a burqa. And the fear was just so evident in their hearts. Unrational, irrational fear just because she was wearing a burqa. And sometimes that difference that we, Lord, I thought, how do we change our hearts to receive the other, to receive the Samaritan in our midst, to receive, whether it's you looking at me or me looking at you, them as your child. Even if they haven't yet believed, haven't yet known who Christ is. They're maybe the black sheep of the family we're trying to get back in because they are created by our Father. Have you thought about it that way? I wonder why he taught us to pray. Jesus taught us to pray, our Father, not my Father. He is my Father. I am so glad he's my Father. But he is our Father, and he's the Father of all that he created. And that changes, Lord, give me your love to fill in those places where I'm not able to love as you are. I wasn't even going to share that. I don't know where that came from. Okay. That bonding that I felt, as I said in the early days, I mentioned yesterday, the dream that had come into my heart, that sense of this is now like my place. I felt that way. Maybe because people called me Dee Dee. I don't know. I wasn't quite such an old Dee Dee at that time. Anyway, now it's Bojo, with the little ones. Anyway, but one day that sense of joy that I had in being in Nepal, it crashed. Not my love for Nepal, but when I was detained at the border and taken into police custody, and they took my passport and said, "You're not wanted in our country anymore." And by God's grace, maybe because I spoke Nepali, we were able to negotiate, and I was given 1 week, taken under escort to Kathmandu, and had to get a ticket and be out of the country. And I thought, Lord, have I missed it somehow? Why? You called me here. You opened all the doors. You made all the way for me to be here. And suddenly I'm cast out? Has the enemy won a victory? Don't we feel that way sometimes? I really was. I was so struggling. And it was Christmas time. It should have been fantastic that I got to go home for Christmas. But I was weeping all the way through Christmas. And because there was just this confusion inside. And I was in a place where I was learning to know my God, to know my Father in the place of darkness. We heard a little bit about this from Daniel yesterday. In the place of our weeping, that he is with us. But we don't always discern, what is this about? Why did this happen? And we can't always even answer the question. But he's not looking for us to find an answer, to put it all in a box. He's looking for us to trust him. And it was time for me to trust, to take some new steps, that it was his mission, his vision, even though I couldn't see where it was going at that time, where he was leading. So I was back into a place of feeling a little bit like Abraham, perhaps, of walking into the unknown. But as I took steps, and as I waited, and when I say wait, I don't mean sitting in a corner somewhere. Poor me. Of course, you never feel that way, right? Okay, one or two of you have. Waiting is active, not passive. It's an actively seeking God, but not pushing to make it happen our way. It's surrendering control of our life, to allow him to be in control. And it was amazing, the doors that God opened through that time. Things that I never could have envisioned. And you've heard about a little bit of it. We touched on it in that he opened the doors for me to go to Wheaton Graduate School, and I got professional help to write up the history of the church. I'd probably still be taking interviews if that hadn't happened, because that's the enjoyable part, But I didn't have literally $2 to rub together. I could never have gone to Wheaton Graduate School of my own, or if it was my plan. I had given everything in going off to Nepal. But God's resources, his riches, are beyond our imagining. And And from there, it opened up things for me to go back to Nepal when I finished that briefly, meet with the church leaders like Pastor Robert, who Prakash was sharing about, Dr. Rajendra Rongong, some of those who had been working together for the Church History Project. And I had an invitation from the University of Edinburgh. And I met with the church leaders and I said, look, they're asking me to go there, to take all of the archives, to take all of the things that have been collected about the church history, all of the transcripts, the tapes, etc., and deposit them there. What do you think? And they were like, yes, this needs to be preserved. It still wasn't safe in Nepal at that time to have these kind of things. And the second thing they were asking was, we feel like you need to go and do a PhD. And I was like, what? Me? I'm not, that wasn't me, but I had an invitation actually from Professor Andrew Walls in Edinburgh. And again, God opened doors that were never a part of my life plan. God has a plan for us. And he can take and adjust that plan if we make missteps. So don't worry. You don't have to know what the end is going to look like before you get started. In fact, you'll never start if you wait for that. This is not about my plan. It's surrendering my plan into his hands. And that, anyway, for me, that things opened up at the University of Edinburgh. And Dr. Rongong's younger brother, Birendra, was actually living in Edinburgh. And he and his family opened their home to me and said, you work with my brother. That means your family. Come and live with us. And again, I still had no money. Professor Walls recommended me for a certain scholarship. Everything just... And what we ended up with, I went back to Pastor Robert, to Dr. Rongong, to Birabhadur Rai in the east, and we had key leaders from the west and the far west. And I said, what is it that the church needs? And they actually helped me to write the proposal for my PhD, which was basically to research the Nepali diaspora, all the migrations of Nepalis out of Nepal into Sikkim, into Bhutan. So that's where I had the opportunity to study the history of the church in Bhutan, and on throughout Northeast India into Myanmar, and literally globally. That was I was doing that in the early 90s. It looks a whole lot different today because people are on the move, and I could trace exactly how many countries Nepalis had gone to at that time, where the churches were, where the believers were. Today, it's kind of gotten out of control, but what a wonderful out of control. But these are things God opened the doors. He spoke to me out of Deuteronomy 1, 8 and 9, which basically, where the Lord was saying I'll just get it real quick here. It says, the Lord spoke to us at Mount Horeb. And he said, you've stayed long enough at this mountain. But I want to stay at this mountain. I liked that mountain. But it was like, you've stayed long enough here. Resume your journey and go on. Go into this hill country. Go to there. You see, he was opening doors that I didn't even know to knock on because of his plans that opened up so many other things. And that opened the way that when I came back from Edinburgh, we had discovered so many places that God was sovereignly working amongst Nepali-speaking people, not only in different parts of India, but into the Middle East, and in many countries around the world. But I found places where the church in Nepal, the church in Darjeeling, they had no idea that over in Dharamsala there was a Nepali church, or that there was a Nepali church in Myanmar, in what used to be called Burma. But in Myanmar, they didn't have any songbook. They had songbooks with words, they didn't know the music. That was, actually, we helped to take those first songbooks in. So they were trying to sing, with their own tunes. So it's great, to go to a church worship service and kusi kusi manao, kusi kusi manao, and I know how it should be, and here they come, kusi kusi manao, kusi kusi. I mean, I can't repeat how they did it, but they had a very unique way of singing it. because they'd never heard it. So, taking recordings to them. Found church in Manipur and in Mizoram where they didn't have any Bibles. Simple things like that. So starting to be able to make connections across borders and between peoples that cared but didn't know who to care for, in a sense. And that was about the time that the 82,000 movement was blossoming. Probably not many of you here aware of the 82,000 and beyond movement, but we were able to tap into that, so to speak, and sort of the Himalaya 2000 movement, which, with the help of Aidan Rongong, that Prakashji was sharing about earlier, we're able to bring together Nepali-speaking leaders from across the whole Himalayan region and a few from outside in 1996 for the Himkoi movement, Himalayan Congress of Evangelism. And I don't, Prakashji, तपाईँ 96 मा हुनुहुन्थ्यो, 98 मा पनि आउनुभयो, अनि फेरि ग्लोबल समिट त पहिला पनि जानुभयो कि बाहिर, हजुर, पटायामा जहाँ चाहिँ त भएन. Okay. So we had the Himkoi movement, which was in that Himalayan region, which was fantastic to bring together leaders, Nepali-speaking leaders that didn't know each other in many cases, hadn't met together, and to see the common vision and to see the common thing that God was speaking. We had 2,500 together, all in tents. And it was really special because it rained a whole lot at that time, and the tent filled up with water. And so I'm sitting on the chair, with my feet up in the air like this because it was flooding. We had to bring in pumps to get the water out. But you know what? Nobody left. Everybody was in there because it was something the Spirit of God was doing. And that's what we want to always be looking for. Whatever conference or training or meeting, is this a move of the Spirit of God? Are we in the stream of what He's doing? And that whole focus was on church planting and on a church for every village and the gospel to every Nepali-speaking person. And in 98, the Lord expanded our vision to make it a mission vision. And we met up in Darjeeling. And again, huge numbers that came together. And someone that was there was sharing with me the day they were maybe that was you remembering, Prakashji, about the torch rally and what we called the passing of the torch. You see, some of the first original missionaries from that region were still alive. One couple came off the plane from Scandinavia. I had not met them before, but I had researched about them. I'd written their story from documentation. We invited them to come to be part of passing the torch from the missionaries to the Nepali church. You are the missionaries now, was the whole point. And he was in a wheelchair, 90-some years old, but so excited to be there. Why? So excited because he said, we never thought in our lifetime that we would ever see this many Nepalis had come to Christ. Isn't it amazing what God's doing? They were so blessed just to be there and absorb it, and then to pass the torch on with others at that time. And that became a movement in Sikkim and throughout the Darjeeling area of what they did, winter gospel trekking. And the winter gospel trekking was getting teams of young people, whether they were professionals or students. Some of those young people were 50. That's, when you're my age, 50 is young. But most were younger, probably about the age of a lot of you. And they all gave up a month of their time to literally trek through the areas where villages had not ever been reached with the gospel. And we saw so many that came to Christ. But what I loved about it, not just, of course, the coming to Christ, but what was so wonderful when they came back and reported afterwards, these teams of, somebody would say, I prayed for somebody and they were healed. Wow, we met a demon-possessed person and they were delivered. And they were experienced, I felt like I'm back in the New Testament. When Jesus' disciples came back after He had sent them out, and they were like, wow, God, you use us. You want to use us. And they're just, quote, ordinary believers. And I think that's what God's wanting to do, even through, a time like this, a place like this, amongst you it's not the full-time workers, it's not the pastors, and that's nothing against the full-time workers, but He wants to empower everyone that has taken His name to be His representative, to be His hands and feet in whatever place that he takes you. That's the church. That's the body of Christ working together. But we've become so institutionalized in our church, and I'm very, very sorry. I want to publicly apologize for what the Western church has modeled in going out in mission in many places of what church is, because it becomes, I need a pulpit, I need a building, we need to have this structure, we have to have these offices. That's not the church we see in the New Testament. The church is a living body of people, of those that have taken his name and are walking together cooperatively. Okay, I'm off my notes again. Right. Yeah. Before I go to the slideshow, one thing I really want to say is there's nothing more important in your lives as followers of Jesus than nurturing your intimate walk with God. Nothing more important than surrendering your heart, which means every part of your life, into his hands and allowing him, asking him, seeking him to transform your heart, because that's where it starts. You can do all the good works. You can know the spiritual, the four spiritual laws, and you can get people to say the prayer and bring people into the church, but your heart is what Jesus is really after. So it's not just declaring he is Lord. It's not just believing. In the Bible it says even the demons believe. Okay? It's declaring he is Lord and living a life that exemplifies his lordship, allowing him to truly be Lord of your life. Conscious surrender to his lordship, to his kingship. That's what the kingdom of God is about today, here in our midst, is allowing him to reign. Because he's a gentleman. He doesn't impose his reign. He doesn't impose his lordship. But you surrender to him, and he'll take your life and use you in your profession, whether you're in your studies, in any place that you go, in ways you never imagined. Because he can see all that he's planted inside of you. When he looks at you, he doesn't just see what you or I see in each other. He sees, Bonnie, you are one I created from your mother's womb. You are someone beloved to me. And he wants to develop every gift that he's planted in you, every uniqueness that he's put within us, to his glory. But we get so caught up in our culture, in our world, in all the demands of it. And he wants to draw us back. Just come back. Let me embrace you, is what the Father's looking for. He's waiting for us. We're all prodigals in one sense. Do you know that the Father, when he was waiting for his prodigal son, was the Father sitting there on his, all right, come on, just waiting for you to come back? And when he heard he was coming, did he sit and wait and call the elders of the village? Right here, come on. Legally, culturally, what should he have done? Absolutely. Culturally, legally, his son had totally disrespected him. His son had shamed his name. His son needed to repent. And what did the Father do? He ran for his son. He did everything countercultural because of the love for that son. That was more important, to be able to embrace him again and say, you are still my son. We can't go any place so far that we can escape the Spirit of God. Not escape in the sense of that he's looking to bam us. Escape his love. It's just that we can't see it sometimes. We're afraid because we've been taught the wrong image of who God is. God is not a vindictive God who's looking to punish us for our sin. He's looking to embrace us and to cover that sin. And he's already accomplished it in Jesus Christ. Okay, my topic today is supposed to be about Nepalis and the global world. So you got the sermon first, and now, no. Actually, that's not a sermon. It's just really trying to express my heart a little bit to you. And what I sense is the heart of God towards each one of you. His desire towards you. Don't ever let go of the fact that God's desire is towards you. And He will never desert you or forsake you, no matter how far you may. And we all do at times. He's ever beckoning. Okay. The changing face of the globe. We are in a global world. We are in a world that's changing so fast by globalization. This slide says the world is crowded. World population now is more than 7 billion. And if I have any wrong statistics, somebody tell me later and I'll fix it. Okay. But we've got more than 7 billion people. I can't begin to count that or even actually understand what that means. But they say in another 10 to 15 years, there'll be another billion added. By the year 2050, we're supposed to reach 9 billion people on this earth. India is, before 2050, is meant to surpass the population of China. And that has incredible consequences and implications. We're not only crowded, but maybe because of that crowding and what's happening in the world, the dispersion of peoples, the movement of peoples globally is expanding. More than 200 million, okay? And this is back in 2005. People who had left their country, whether they were forced out or whether they were seeking just a better life, like we discussed a bit yesterday. And there's more than that today. That was 2005, 200 million. And another at least 35 million displaced within their own countries due to natural disasters, civil war, all kinds of factors. No time to go into particulars of that, just to get a sense. But some people say we're like living in a borderless world. In America, it may not feel that way. Our government is trying very hard to build walls on the border and to keep people out. But the reality is, with the pressures, the push factors going on in countries, the border wall isn't going to do a lot of good. And anyway, I'm not here to talk politics. This is about the world. And Nepali speakers, whether originally from Nepal or from Bhutan or from Sikkim or from Darjeeling, they're on the move as well. More than a third of Nepalko Nepaliaru are outside of Nepal. That's, more than 10 million people outside of their own home country. Now many of them have new home countries. Now, I'm not sure on the statistics on the Bhutanese Nepali, but was it about 100,000 in the refugee camps? Is that right? And almost all have been resettled now in different countries. How many different countries? Does anybody know? 7 right now. Okay, in 7 different countries. And as we say this, as we think of it, just think of what are the implications of these things? Implications for those families, for the future. Implications of perhaps what God might do through our being in these different places as well. As of 2010, they said that more than half of Nepali households in Nepal had at least one member of the family outside the country. I'm sure that statistic is much higher now. I just don't have current statistics. And the same for many from the Darjeeling area, etc. There's a continual stream going out for studies, going out for livelihood, going out for different factors, medical reasons, etc., etc. But another factor that's not so nice of the return, this was back in about 2010, at least 3 dead bodies of Nepalis a day were being returned to Nepal that were labor migrants in places like Dubai, Qatar, etc., Malaysia. And many more than that maimed through their factory jobs, etc., in unsafe conditions. So there are negative factors very much, as well as other. What is What does the Lord say to us in these things? People are on the move, not only Nepalis, many, many peoples in the Middle East right now, and from North Africa. We find incredible movements of people, incredible suffering going on. They're going from everywhere to everywhere, it seems. But we need to remember in the midst of it, God is on the move as well. He has, not that it's His purpose or desire that all of those movements have taken place. I don't believe God ever imposes or desires the suffering, but as we said yesterday, He can redeem it. He can use it to bring something good out of it. Even as in my case, where I felt almost like I was picked up by the neck and taken out of Nepal when there was nothing in me wanted to leave. And what to me, I thought maybe the enemy won a victory, I realized later, God used that in ways incredible. He will take those circumstances and use them to His glory if we allow Him, if we surrender in it. I'd like you just to think about, there's a question here in yellow. It says, to share stories of Nepali-speaking Christians that you know who are outside of their own country. So that could be any one of you, of course, but in these 150 plus countries we mentioned where Nepalis have been dispersed to, who are ones that you can think of that God is using to be a blessing in the places they've gone, using in different ways, whether it's they've started a church, or whether it's in their profession in some way. Maybe just turn to the two or three around you and share a couple of stories of people you know. And then we can share two or three of them with the group as a whole. Can you just turn around? Do you understand the question? Okay. So any Nepali speakers out that have been dispersed to one of these 150 some countries around the world that you know God is using in special ways and to be a blessing. Okay, I'm going to cut your sharing short because our time is a bit short. I think I started about 15 minutes ago, which was about an hour late. So you won't mind if your lunch is late, right? You'll enjoy it more. Okay, one or two of you, who had in their group a story that they'd like to share with everybody? Quickly. Any stories that you felt were particularly interesting or dynamic? Yeah, Mohan.
I have, this is one of my, your wife relatives, okay? उसलाई काम गर्नलाई आसाममा जान्छ नेपाली बच्चे आसाममा जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ उसले एउटा ग्रुप फ्यामिली भयो उहाँ गएर काम गर्दा उसले निकै गरेछ क्या गर्नुभएको छैन गर्नुभएपछि पछि हामी सोध्दाखेरि लास्ट भएर
Sorry, I didn't get the mic ready for you quickly, but thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
समय चाहिँ हाम्रो ग्रुप चाहिँ यता मिनेसोटा सेन्ट पल सेन्ट क्लाउडबाट हौँ अनि अब त्यहाँ मैले आफै देख्दाखेरि चाहिँ किशोर पास्टर हुनुहुन्छ उहाँको जीवनबाट पनि हामीले धेरै आशिष पाएको छौँ किनकि उहाँले धेरै ठुलो ग्रुपलाई चाहिँ ल्याउनु भएको छ प्रभुमा अनि एउटा अर्गनाइज्ड वेमा प्रभुलाई महिमा दिनुभएको छ प्लस अनि डेभिड र निलु दुईजना हाम्रो एल्डर्सहरू हुनुहुन्छ उहाँलाई हामी फलो गर्छौँ अनि उहाँद्वारा पनि आई थिङ्क गडको प्लानहरू भएको छ प्लस I'm really inspired by Samuel Dai पनि अनि like 2 years ago म यहाँ आउँदाखेरि पनि सामुएल दाईलाई मैले काम गरेर देख्न पाउँदाखेरि उहाँको जीवन हम्बल अनि प्रभुमा उहाँले जसरी काम गर्नुभएको छ we all are inspired by it and yeah thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Let me throw one in and then I'll give another chance. I don't know if any of you have met Ronald Adhikari. Ronald is actually Ashok Bhai has. He grew up in Mizoram And from Mizoram, he ended up in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, his ministry started out amongst Nepalis before, but he ended up being a minister to other immigrant communities and became a leader of the mission group that he was a part of there. And a lot of that was through his heart that God just put on his heart for other peoples as well. And it was, to me, he's been an example of someone who, a lot of mission that we've talked about in the Nepali-speaking world has been Nepali to Nepali, okay, or Nepali speaker to Nepali speaker. But he was one of the early ones to get a vision for Nepali to the ends of the world and going out to a place like Taiwan and having some dynamic ministry there. So just as an example. Anyone else? Yeah.
मैले भन्दिनँ भनेको मेरो श्रीमतीले भन्नु भन्यो त्यही भएर यस्तो नाम लिनु पर्दा चाहिँ सायद तपाईहरुले कतिले चिन्नुहुन्छ डाक्टर मनोज श्रेष्ठ अनि उहाँ चाहिँ नेपाल पाटन चर्चको हुनुहुन्छ अनि अहिले चाहिँ नेपाल ब्याप्टिस्ट चर्चमा उहाँले सेवा गर्नुहुन्छ अनि त्यो भन्दा अगाडि नेपाल ब्याप्टिस्ट चर्च चाहिँ इज फाउन्डेड बाइ वन कोरियन मैन इट्स द फर्स्ट चर्च आई बिलिभ इट्स द फर्स्ट और सेकेन्ड चर्च इन अमेरिका नेपाली स्पिकिङ चर्च अनि उहाँ चाहिँ कोरियन हो उहाँलाई नेपाली पनि आउँदैन बुढा मान्छे अहिले त बिचरा 80-85 भइसक्नु भयो कोरियामा जन्म भयो अमेरिका अनि उहाँले चाहिँ नेपालीको बिचमा सेवाकाई गर्नुभयो सो वी क्यान जस्ट रिलेट द्याट इट इज द डायस्पोरा उहाँबाट आएर अर्को कम्युनिटीमा अनि त्यसपछि पास्टर मनोज उहाँ नेपालबाट अमेरिकामा आएर अनि प्लस एज अ अमेरिकामा अहिले यो पछिल्लो समयको टेक्नोलोजी चेन्जले गर्दा चाहिँ एक ठाउँमा मात्र लिमिटेसन नभइकन हिज एक्सपान्डिङ हिज मिनिस्ट्री लाइक डिफ्रेन्ट ठाउँमा अमेरिकाको धेरै ठाउँमा उहाँ गइरहनुहुन्छ प्रचार गरिरहनुहुन्छ कतिले चिन्नुहुन्छ अनि अझ अरू देशहरूमा अस्ति भर्खरै लास्ट विक पनि कतारमा अथवा दुबईमा कहाँ प्रचार गर्न जानुभएको थियो अनि गड इज युजिङ द पिपल फ्रम ब्याक होम टु अदर कन्ट्री एन्ड मान्छे अरू देशको अरू देशमा पनि अरू कम्युनिटीमा पनि थ्याङ्क यू
Thank you. I was always also thinking of a young man, I was trying to remember his name. I think it's Dunbar, but he's been in Lebanon for a number of years. Lebanon, a very difficult place. And he is a very keen believer, but somehow he got promoted into the position of representing Nepal, back to the Nepal government from Lebanon, and has been used to help in rescue of a number of people who have... I'm powerful. Okay. I need to go back. Okay. Oh, don't get... Thank you. I just like to be close. And so even in government positions now, we're finding Nepalis in other countries and in all kinds of professions, etc. I wish we had time to really explore that more. I hope someone will actually do some research on it and just help us, all to understand and have pride in how God has used your own people in so many amazing ways, even outside of own countries. Okay, we're going to move on. What is this effect of globalization? Stan Nussbaum is a well-known mission researcher and theologian. He said, God did not put us into this time in order to curse the wind, but to sail the ship. Thinking of the wind as that which is pushing people here and there. But to sail the ship. We will not stop this gathering storm of globalization, but we will, with God's help, harness the forces of globalization so that those very forces take us in the direction that God wants, not the direction where they are trying to blow us. You might have to read that a couple times to catch it. But I think it's powerful. We think that the forces of globalization, that the forces of government, that the forces of culture, that's what's forming us or is limiting us or whatever. But it's not. If we're surrendered to God and we're in the stream of what He's doing, He can take those very things and transform them, redeem them, to put us in His direction and to use us in ways that we wouldn't imagine. That Joseph experience, what do you think that's referring to? That's in Genesis 50, verse 20. Somebody probably knows. Ashok, what does that mean? What was... Yeah, and it was...
beyond those suffering, all the hardship, everything, he continued to remain in God. And God made him very successful, used him. He became like a prime minister at the time.
Yeah.
God used to really to bless others.
Yeah. And his own brothers tried to murder him, actually. And he's in the pit. I mean, talk about deep suffering. And yet, when he was reunited with his brothers later, and he had the opportunity to get his revenge, he didn't take any revenge. His heart was what the enemy meant for harm, God has used for good. He accepted even the suffering that he had endured as part of what God was using to prepare him to be the man he was in the Pharaoh's kingdom at that time, but then also to redeem his own people. The Israeli people probably would have died of starvation if he hadn't opened the granaries of Egypt to them at that time. So that whole principle of even though you intended it for harm, God intended it for good, to preserve his people, and he's doing that today. May he use us in that way. Migration isn't just one of the dominant features of our globe. It's becoming one of the most significant opportunities for mission today. It's all how we perceive it. We can look at everything negative. You know, you can have the cup of water that's half full. And you can say it's either half full or it's half empty, right? So this is looking at it as the half full type. It's an opportunity if we allow God to take and use it for his purposes. Diaspora, we all know that term, the dispersion. And all of you are a part of the Nepali-speaking diaspora in some way. Is this one of God's strategic tools today for achieving his mission? I think it is. It's a whole new field of missiology, actually, in the Bible schools. You go to Fuller, you go to Trinity, you go to Wheaton, and it's coming on to the curriculum now as a whole new field of missiology, is diaspora missiology, because there's such a huge movement of peoples all over the world. And it's getting a sense of what is God doing in this? How is he going to use it for his purposes? And how can we cooperate with him in that? Okay, how can Nepali-speaking followers of Jesus, like you and I, and Nepali-speaking churches in diaspora respond to the effects of this globalization? That you're all been a part of it, whether you knew it or not. I want you to discuss these questions a bit in your groups again. And I'll, again, just make a group where you are. And if some of the organizing team want to disperse a little bit, I don't know if you want to do that in terms of sharing with the other groups. But let me just the questions. Has God planted you in a new nation in order to be a witness of his kingdom to that nation and to other local immigrant communities? Is that part of his purposes, or how he would use to redeem, for you to be a witness right here to his kingdom, to Caucasian Americans perhaps, but as well as to other immigrant communities? The second question, does God want you to use the blessings that you are receiving here in your new country to bless your original home country in some way? To not be just considered the brain drain. You know, we talk about the brain drain in Nepal. All the most promising ones, the ones who have the finance as well, or that they have the opportunity, the scholarship, etc. But to become a brain gain back to your country in some way. And I'm not implying anything by that in terms of meaning where you would live, etc. But is there some way God wants to use not only to be a blessing where you are, to your receptor community, but back in your country? Mohan, you are one who was sharing some thoughts you've had that way. Would you just share briefly with them what you've been sensing or feeling, just as an example?
म चाहिँ त्यो टोरन्टोमा अस्ति एउटा कन्फरेन्स भएको थियो, त्यसमा चाहिँ नेपाली हायर एजुकेसन नेपालमा कसरी इम्प्याक्ट गर्न सकिन्छ भनेर हामी चाहिँ जम्मा भएको थियौँ क्या। त्यहाँ एकदम अब म त अब सबभन्दा कान्छा होला सायद, उनीहरू त एकदमै एक्सपिरियन्स मान्छेहरू, अब ठुल्ठुलो युनिभर्सिटीमा एकदम रिनाउन प्रोफेसर्सहरू अबदेखि लिएर सबै हुनुहुन्थ्यो त्यहाँ। अनि एक्ज्याक्टली यो वर्ड पनि युज भएको थियो क्या, त्यो ब्रेन ड्रेन र ब्रेन गेइन भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ। तर उनीहरूले चाहिँ अझ डिफ्रेन्ट तरिकाले पनि युज गरिरहेको थियो। भन्नाले अब हामीहरू यो समयमा बसेर यहाँबाट चाहिँ अब नेपाललाई कसरी के गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ त्यो चाहिँ टक भएको थियो क्या। जस्तो अब त्यो चाहिँ एकदम स्पेसिफिक फिल्ड चाहिँ हायर एजुकेसनको बारेमा कुरा भइरहेको थियो। कस्तो कस्तो कुरा भइरहेछ अनि कस्तो कस्तो कुरा निड छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ हामीले टक गरेका थियौँ क्या। अनि त्यो एकदम ब्रेन स्टर्मिङ एकदम राम्रो थियो। किनभने डिफ्रेन्ट आइडियाजहरू अब डिफ्रेन्ट मान्छेहरूको डिफ्रेन्ट आइडियाजहरू कलेक्ट गरेर जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ यो चाहिँ एउटा छिटो राम्रोसँग इम्प्याक्ट गर्न सकिन्छ इन्डिभिजुअल गएको भन्दा पनि। त्यो चाहिँ डिस्कसन भएको थियो। त्यही कुराहरू चाहिँ हाम्रो चर्चमा पनि एकदम गर्न सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ क्या मलाई। किनभने हामी चर्चहरूमा एउटा मात्रै गयो भने चाहिँ धेरै इम्प्याक्ट गर्न सकिन्छ। तर सबै मिलेर गयो भने डिफ्रेन्ट एङ्गल हेर्न सकिन्छ नि सेम कुरालाई। अनि गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ हामी इफेक्टिभ हुन सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ क्या। त्यो कुरा चाहिँ दिदीसँग कुरा भएको छ।
Thank you. I think that's a great example of just how that kind of brainstorming and sense of seeking to listen to what God has to say with the particular skills, the particular thing that may have to contribute. Being creative, being innovative. Let God excite your imaginations. Yeah? I know a lot of you here are still students, but even as a student, it's amazing what impact that you can have and that I've seen through students' lives. And as you're dreaming about your future, and let God open up new ideas, new ways of thinking of what possibilities there could be. Because we often come with a pretty narrow idea, and that's formed by our culture or by our parents or by whatever those forces have been. Just ask God, Lord, give me your imagination in this. Help me to see what you see. What are the possibilities? And then don't be afraid to experiment, to try different things, to call friends together. I mean, that could have been a flop when they called each other together, but it wasn't, because they got, iron sharpens iron, it says in the Bible. Our minds and our sharing of these things can sharpen each other as well. Okay, so the first one's about in your new nation, or in the place where you're at now, how might God want to use you here and to other immigrant communities here? The second one was, are there ways that God would use you back in your own country in some way? I know that's not easy for the Bhutanese, because you're not welcome back in what you consider your country. But God has creative ways, even of making ways where we can't see a way. And the third one is God calling you perhaps in some way to reach out to other Nepali speakers in one of the 100+ countries where there are no known Nepali churches? You see, we can trace Nepalis in more than 150 countries around the world, and there's the statistics back in 2011 were about 32 of those countries had known Nepali churches, congregations. But what about the other 100+? And then from them, is God taking Nepalis to all of these countries, to these, and with different religion, different culture, so different language, so much that's not easy. But for His purposes, to be a light to the nations? What an amazing possibility. Remember what we said from Acts 1:8. He's called us to be His witnesses. In Jerusalem, maybe this is your Jerusalem for right now. Or maybe your Jerusalem is back in Bhutan, or you can perceive that how you would. And unto Judea and Samaria, those that are not like you, those that are, the Samaritans were the hated ones, or the ones that we were afraid of. And to the ends of the earth. God trusts you. This is on His heart. It's not me, Cindy Perry, trying to challenge you into something. He sees the possibilities in you that you don't see. And don't miss it. So, get together with 3 or 4 friends again and talk about these 3 questions, please. And then we'll feedback for a few minutes.